Measuring cups and spoons are my least favorite kitchen tools, and honestly, that's not a unique opinion. All your favorite cooks and chefs are measuring with scales.
Grab a scale. If someone saw you messing around with the cups, they'd be like, what are you doing?
And it's almost entirely cookbook and magazine publishers' fault that home cooks are mostly still using measuring cups. In 2023, measuring cups are the worst way to measure ingredients by every metric except battery life. They're inconsistent, they're inconvenient, and they're holding home cooks back. While most countries moved to the metric system decades ago, countries love to be special, and none more so than the good old United States.
America!
Case in point, the cup, perhaps the stupidest measurement of all time. It's based on the British Standard Cup, which is defined as 10 imperial fluid ounces. Sure, fine. 10 is a nice round number. As always, the US just had to be different, so we defined our customary cup as 8 US fluid ounces. And yes, your dry measuring cup uses fluid ounces too. But hey, I like 8, it's easy to divide in half multiple times, and at least a cup is a cup, right? Wrong. The problem is that those 8 fluid ounces are equivalent to 236.588 milliliters. And because 236.588 is a frustrating number to work with when converting to metric, we have what's known as the US legal cup. That's the measurement we use when we're doing food labeling, and it's 240 milliliters even. Clean, simple, beautiful, we love her. The more metrically inclined countries, as usual, did an even better job and gave us the metric cup, 250 milliliters even. But what's important is that usage isn't consistent. If you've ever found that your wet measuring cup holds more than your dry measuring cup, it's not because those are supposed to be different measurements. They're not. It's because the manufacturers use different definitions of a cup.
Liberty, son, liberty.
We complain about the whole 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon style of recipe writing in our cookbook reviews all the time, because that's just extra fuss that you wouldn't have to deal with if you were measuring by weight.
You don't even separate them, they just go together.
In fact, if you see that in a recipe, it's a clear sign that the author originally wrote the recipe using weight-based measurements and had to convert them over to volume. The most convenient measurement is one that you can use for both dry and wet ingredients and has a fine enough resolution that you rarely have to use fractions of a unit. And the best common unit today is called a gram. Even if you like those measurements for some reason, despite their inconsistencies, it still takes less dishes to measure by weight than by volume. Because there are no measuring dishes to clean. You can measure directly into a pan or a mixing bowl or whatever you're actually working in. So why do we have them? Well, measuring cups were a huge quality of life improvement for home cooks back in the late 1800s when they were first adopted. But back then, measuring by weight meant fiddling with counterweights and balances. We don't have that problem today.
It's a fact.
The problem is that because most home cooks today already tend to have measuring cups, cookbook and magazine publishers require authors to include those measurements in their recipes so they can sell more units. And that just reinforces the status quo. In a world with cheap, efficient digital scales though, there's really no point in continuing to publish recipes with those measurements. It's like if Hollywood had just stuck with VHS because somewhere in everyone's attic was a VCR. I think we can all agree that'd be a worse experience for everyone involved. And that's why we insist on writing all of our own recipes with almost exclusively weight-based measurements. We know not everyone has a kitchen scale just yet, but we think it's the best experience for home cooks over the long term. The good news is that cookbooks today are starting to come out with at least conversions to metric, and digital scales aren't too expensive. We tested a dozen or so kitchen scales a couple years back, and our recommendation for most home cooks is the KitchenAid KQ908. We especially loved its simple controls and its relative accuracy at a low price point, usually under 30 bucks. The one we tend to use most day to day is the OXO 11-pound digital scale, mainly because it tacks on some nice bonus features like a pull-out display for measuring under large mixing bowls. But it costs twice as much as the KitchenAid, and both will get the job done. In some rare cases, a cook might need a finer resolution, especially below these scales' effective 2 gram minimum. In that case, we like the AWS LB3000, which measures accurately all the way down to 1/100th of a gram. But on the downside, it's got a much lower max capacity than the other two, and frankly, most cooks will never need something like that. Measuring cups are a scam, don't put up with it. Learn to cook by weight, you'll have a much better time.
You're gonna like the way you cook.
God damn it, why didn't I think of that?